Can you repeat that?
You ever suggest people to shut these back valves behind the filters, so the ethanol doesn't evaporate out when it's sitting?
No, I really haven't even thought of that.
It's one trick I do too. I forgot to do it, and this is a little lower than I liked. Usually they're both pretty full. That's one trick I believe definitely keep the filters saturated. Like these tanks?
Oh yeah, these things are huge.
Yeah.
So what size capacity we have here?
And these are what, 240 gallons?
240 gallons?
Yeah.
Right on it. Why do you have two?
Just to have a batch ready to go right after another, or if you have a big batch, you can separate it into your halves right here on this spot, and then I can run it through recover, and then you can move your first half over to your post-production area, and then you can start your second half on your recovery and split. Or if you want to just keep feeding the need, we can just keep feeding it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so like how does your setup work? Like what do you do? Run me through, like, we're gonna start today. What have you already done, and then what are we expecting to do today?
All right. So we already pre-filtered our tincture down about 4 times already, and before we put it in. So we started with 2 trolley filters, which is also one of your piece of equipment. So with 2 trolleys, winterization into our first collection tank, and that will be pushed into our lenticular filter. Then our lenticular goes into our column filter, and then from the column we'll pick what vessel.
So this is, what size lenticular are you using here?
That one's 45 micron.
45 micron, and what filter paper size are you using?
Starting with a 45 down to a 3 micron.
Okay, and then this is a 0.2, a sterilization size.
Yep, exactly, 0.2 micron.
And that's perfect filtration. That's what we recommend, going down to 0.2 to get you something that's not going to foul your membranes. Fair enough. Okay, and then so then you have your micella that's pre-filtered, and more or less what ratio do you have? Like 10 to 1, 30 to 1, do you know?
I would probably say probably 20 to 1.
Probably 20 to 1?
For the saturation level.
Right on.
Yeah. We are over in this tank right now where it's unconnected. So we're just going to be running this vessel. We'll be running it into the Sombo, and we'll start returning our ethanol on this side into our 55-gallon barrels.
Okay, so this is the tank that you're going to use today.
Yep.
This is pre-filtered micella.
Yep.
And then it comes in through here, and then you have a pre-filter.
Yep.
Right? Okay. It goes through the process, and then what are these? So the clean micella comes out this pipe, right?
Yep, you return.
Okay.
I'm
and
clean.
And then this goes back into this tank.
Into this tank.
And why is that?
For the recirculation purposes.
Okay.
As we're slowly going to be running through the filters, and the ethanol is going to be permeating, and we'll be slowly pulling the ethanol out, and the tincture will just constantly be permeating over the filters.
Okay, so the micella goes through the machine, we strip out some of the ethanol, and it goes into this tank, and that's clean ethanol that's ready to go. You can reuse that immediately, right?
Exactly.
And then what doesn't permeate goes back to the beginning, back to your feed tank.
Yep.
So it's basically a loop.
Yep.
And we're stripping a little bit of solvent. And in this case, we're doing ethanol, right? We can do ethanol, methanol, and other solvents like that. So fair enough. And how fast are you able to permeate with the machine, just overall in general?
We're and very average is a 0.5 return rate on the ethanol, so it's going to give us half a gallon a minute, looking at 30 gallons a minute. But once your temperature, you start getting into your sweet spot about 30 Celsius, you're going to start seeing upwards of 36 gallons to 39 gallons an hour.
So from 30 to 39 gallons per hour, depending on the temperature and the concentration. So the higher the temperature up to the sweet spot of 30 Celsius, the higher the permeation. And then the lower the concentration, the more dilute the solution is, the higher the permeation. As you concentrate, the permeation goes down. So it's an inverse curve.
Exactly.
Fair enough. And then pressures, what is the sweet spot on pressure?
Sweet spot is definitely 600 PSI.
And that's stable throughout the whole process?
It is stable. Your bottom pressure gauge correlating up to your top pressure gauge is running about 10 psi, a little higher because it's before the filters.
Right.
So I would always recommend keeping an eye and watching both of those. You can see if you have an issue in your filters correlating with your bottom pressure gauge over your top. So watch both of them, but definitely the 600 mark is the sweet spot.
Okay, so you have a 10 psi pressure drop between all four elements.
Yep.
You're trying to describe that if there's a problem, you're going to see a difference in those differential pressures. Like what? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. When our first batch of filters got a little clogged and 30 after about 6-month period, it went from about 10 psi upwards to 50 psi. And so it was definitely a significant notice on the reads.
Okay, so your differential pressure went from 10 to 50, and that kind of gave you an inkling on, aside from the differential pressure, how do you know that there's an issue with the elements themselves? Like, what kind of things do you see after a prolonged period? You know, like, okay, we have a problem, we need to replace them. How do we know that?
Right. Well, with our nice sight glass over here, we can start seeing and see some pigments working its way through, some cannabinoids if you have a major rip. But it's mainly your first sight will be on your sight glass here, and then over into your return as well. If you're starting to have some issues with your filters, you can start seeing
What, a little bit of color, a little bit of smell?
pigment, color for sure. No.
Fair enough. So it's very visual. You'll know.
Yeah, very visual.
Okay.
If you got clean filters with no issue, it's very clear. Looks pretty like brand new ethanol.
Right on. And now that you've had this machine, what, like 9 months or something like that, what have you learned? What tips and tricks can you give the guys here that are interested in this technology?
So it's definitely a super fast recovery machine for our power limitation here on solo phase power without three phase. A lot of tips would be having a heater and chiller connected to your top vessel, and that way you can speed up your run, and then you can hold on to your sweet spot a little longer instead of dictating it based off of just the pressure and temperature rising on itself.
Okay, so let me elaborate on that a little bit more. So there's a heat exchanger up here. And so we just discussed, right, that you have a sweet spot of 30 degrees Celsius to process at. If you're coming off your centrifuge and your solvent is extremely cold, your permeation rate is going to be very slow. Optionally, you can let that reach room temperature. But if you're in a place like where we are right now, where it's like freezing cold outside and this room isn't exactly Florida hot, you can add a heater to heat your micella to get to that 30 Celsius. Second of all, if you go above the 30 degrees Celsius, you run into a problem where the elements, when they're very hot, they will tend to compact at very high temperatures. So to reduce that, having the option to control the process temperature, be it hot or cold, if the temperature starts to creep up on you, you need to chill it, right? So you having that flexibility can keep you in that sweet spot so you optimize your process. And that's why we have a heat exchanger. But you guys don't have one, so you don't need it unless, but if you know what you're doing, if you know how to game the system, if you will, you can get away with not having it. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, like you said, we're in a very cold environment here, so we take a little longer to get to our desired temperature, but we can stay there longer. Comparing to if you were in Florida, you'd get there quicker. And if you didn't have a chiller on it, then you would run to your temperature a lot faster. That makes sense. Essentially, it's your first area where you can start recondensing your ethanol vapors. So if you have it cold and recondensing them and then pushing your ethanol back in here, sometimes when it's real warm, this barrel will just have a lot of vapors that want to try and escape too.
That also makes
Use that as your first condensing area, then right into your barrel, you won't lose nearly as much in here.
That's also a very interesting point. Fair enough. You were also explaining to me earlier about storing the elements. One of the things that are extremely important is never let your elements dry out, because if they dry out, they tend to foul, they go bad. So at the end of the day, keep them wet. And so you were just, can you run that by me again?
Yeah, so a trick I was running is just once your machine is cooled down, your ethanol is always cooling once your machine is turned off. You have your two valves on the back behind your elements, and if you leave them open, there's a chance of vapors escaping over the period that you're not running the machine. So after you turn your machine off, let it sit about 10 minutes, 20, get it to room temp, go ahead and shut your back valves. And then that will ensure your elements being saturated for the time that it's left.
Yeah, and that's really important, that the better you take care of your system, the longer your elements will last. So they're very expensive. You want to take good care of them so you get a good longevity, make it very cost effective. And what about cleaning? What does your cleaning SOP like? When you're done, how do you clean your elements?
So after every batch, we'll get a cleaning cycle of 15 gallons of ethanol into their reservoir here. So you'll change your return line to going from inside your collection vessel back into the reservoir. And we'll fill this up to its sweet spot, about 15 gallons, 10 gallons. And then at that point, when we stop our feed line in, we'll go ahead and transfer the clean ethanol through the system, and we'll run through the whole system for about 5 minutes, just cleaning itself with the ethanol it made.
Do you flush the dirty micella out of the system first?
Yes.
So you first drain everything, then you add 15 gallons of clean, and then you recirculate.
Yep. No, I push the dirty micella out, and then I will then continue to recirculate, just clean ethanol over the filters.
Okay, and because you guys don't have a heater, you can't heat that element. You do get some benefit by heating that solvent to 30°C to clean it out. You can heat it up to a little bit higher than that just to remove any of the gunk out. But it's awesome that you aren't having issues even though you do not have a heater for the cleaning process. So
at that time, we do recover the last bit of ethanol into here. So it is warm ethanol. It is at 30°C, 40°C. It's the last bit of ethanol on the run. It is the warmest ethanol going back through.
Oh, I see. So that's how you trick it. Okay.
Exactly.
So you're already starting with hot ethanol.
Exactly.
That makes sense. And so what do you do with those 15 gallons that you use to clean out the system?
And that 15 gallons will then keep our elements saturated until next use.
But obviously you can't fit 15 here. So what do you do with those original ones that you use to clean the system? Where do those go?
The original will get recycled into
the next run. You just recover whatever cannabinoids are in their next run. It just keeps going on to the next day and to the next batch and just keep recycling that. I get that. Fair enough. What else have you learned?
It can definitely be used as a pump. If you'd like to just use it as an extremely fast pump, you can bypass all of your elements and just go from the bottom all the way around and directly use this to move fluid very quickly.
Fair enough.
If needed.
Fair enough. And these, do you take these are for taking samples, right?
There are samples, yeah. At times, if we need to fill a roto evaporator, we can pull over a keg and we can strip about 14 gallons from the run as it's running. So we can pull some fluid if need be.
And also for analytics, it's very convenient to have sample port to, dispense. And then this thing here is a pre-filter.
Yep.
Do you find that you have to mess with this frequently or no?
Probably once a month is a good tip. It's very easy to clean. Spray with ethanol and air dry it.
Fair enough.
Vapor locks can definitely end up having a vapor lock. I've had one issue with vapor locks that can throw people for a loop.
Can you run that by us?
Yeah. So I did clean the pre-filter element, and then there must have been some vapors locked behind this lower area that couldn't make it through the elements. As we were talking, we will go ahead and flip this filter to keep your elements saturated. So if air or anything gets into this little nook or cranny when you go to try and do your next run, the pump physically can't pull any fluid. So the pump will be running, but it runs completely dry. All your valves will be open. It'll be trying to pull fluid, but it physically can't go anywhere. And so at that point, you got to understand that if there's a vapor lock in your system, you got to analyze and figure out where it's at and help your vapors get out from the back. That's where this valve really comes in handy. You can have your elements shut. If you have found your vapor lock anywhere in your pressure relief valve or in this back area, you can go ahead and open this valve at that time, have your feed shut, have your reservoir open, and all your vapors will escape right through the reservoir. And at that point, you can then continue your run like normal. Valve from our collection tank, or our valve into the feed. We got our reservoir shut. We have both of our element valves open on the back and our pressure knob cracked just slightly. Then turn your swap to manual, and then we're gonna just start slowly feeding the pump. And we're gonna just start slowly listening and watch our ethanol start permeating in. Collect a little bit of our ethanol into our reservoir right now. Going to swan the machine up a little bit. Our ethanol starting to ferment. Start seeing our tincture start coming through our top one, and our ethanol is cleaning up through the bottom. We're going to save that little bit of ethanol for the wash. So we're pretty clear on our sight glass. We're going to start recovering it. We're starting to warm up by just normal pressure and temperature. We're running about 11 Celsius right now, 550 psi, about 2 gallons a minute. Our tincture is running at 1.5 gallons a minute, and we're returning at a 0.38 rate. You can tell that our tincture is now fully through the elements. Ethanol is being fermented, very clear. And slowly start lowering the pressure as we turn the pump speed up, trying to keep it within the 500 range. It's a sweet spot I found. Try and keep your pump within 500 to 600 psi. We made a little pigment, so I didn't want to put it into a clean barrel. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and start returning into our 50 gallon. It's kind of hard to see, but we have a nice flow rate already. Clean ethanol sub. Once we get our parameters up, we'll be looking at filling these barrels every hour and a half. We got a little high on our PSI, starting to warm up naturally. Start increasing our pump speed. At your 3 gallons a minute, you're going to start having your pump alarm go. A very sound-orientated machine. You're listening for your pump to cavitate, listening for any air in your line, and looking for any air, trying to have your back pressure. You constantly want a 0 on your return pressure, so you have no back pressure. But we went with the inch line over the half inch, and that way you ensure there's absolutely no back pressure on the return. We're slowly gaining temperature, so I'm not close to the sweet spot, but we're already returning at a 0.3 gallons a minute on the ethanol. The end pre-filters should be very still. Want to have no vibration in this filter as well. Doesn't take a lot of PSI. 10 PSI is definitely your max. If you have any vibration of this, your needle's jumping, you're going to have something stuck inside of here. You want to adjust or open that up and clean it out when you see me. We're at 5.65 right now. We're collating return numbers. 6 gallons a minute, but those two combined. As it starts to warm up, we're going to start watching our permeation return numbers like increasing very usually. Get that up to about half, 2 words out. Up here, all the tincture goes through this needle, up and down, fast going, fast going. Pressure release valve right here, so if you get too high a pressure, we'll start feeding back into this tank. Right, that's pretty much your parameters. You're going to be at 5.5 return right now, 0.4 return on your up long, totaling up to a 5.8. So we could go up a little more, but as we're getting further, it starts seeing more return. That's a nice sweet spot. Wait, vibration is level. We're seeing now very well. Once we get to it, we're just gonna kind of sit back and watch the barrel swallow. Oh, now we're now pull this one up at this whole speeds. We're gonna start adjusting our barrel flow kind. I think maybe 80% here, then over to the robos, well, 10%, 14%, and like main thing is, yeah, this is just 6 times faster recovery. That's the gallon buck this machine. Returning 80%, still make 2 gallons, takes this 45 minutes. We've got it in line with this. Now we're filtering 3 times more as well. We're go back up to 6 gallons. Right underneath 600 psi. You folks get under, so this one would be right at 600 psi. 5.422 on the tincture return at the 0.47. So that's going to give us 5.9 berry tokens and then 5 neat. Want to take a look in here. Like this waterfalls back from this is the line coming when you just held, right? So it's coming in and it's just dropping in, and then the pump goes up from the bottom. Quits on your day, you can go ahead and start filling your reservoir tank up with your ethanol you're recycling. Go ahead and change your valve, and we're going to start filling this tank up to our recommended location before we start the cleaning process with the ethanol we're recovering. Go ahead, turn our pump off. We're gonna start our cleaning cycle. So we're gonna kill our feed in, and we're gonna open our reservoir that we've been collecting. I like to collect it right up to the neck of the pressure release valve, just in case no fluid is trying to go in and open it up. And that's plenty. That's our sweet spot, is right at the neck of the pressure release valve. We're gonna go ahead and wash with all this clean ethanol and keep recycling into the reservoir. And we're gonna put all of our tincture back in our solvent tank, and we're gonna keep pulling only clean ethanol through.
Our reservoir is slowly dropping as we're cleaning up, or we're just recycling all the clean ethanol. So we're probably a couple of gallons left to drain here. Plenty of ethanol to flush the filters for next time. Getting super clean in there. All the tincture is going back to its home tank for next time we turn the machine on. Warm ethanol suggested. That's why it's smart to use the ethanol you're recovering from the machine. It's already warm for you. Now we're coming to our point where we're gonna slowly shut it off. I like to kill it right before the ethanol all disappears. There's going right about there. Now it's gonna refill. And there we have it. And we have no ethanol getting evaporated out of your reservoir. Make sure all your valves are shut. This time you can let the machine sit for a minute or two, but we're only at 20 degrees today, so we're not very warm. We could go ahead and close our back valves if need be. I'm gonna give it a minute. Throw our lid on so no debris gets back in the reservoir over the weekend. Make sure you got no pressure in your system. And to shut your pressure, you shut your valves to your membrane filters to ensure they stay saturated over the whole weekend. And come back, your sight glasses will be right where you left them. And that's gonna shut her down.
And that's a wrap, boys and girls. And thanks for watching.